When creating an application for touchscreens, you will be using JPEG or PNG images as buttons to link pages for your user experience. As part of this series, we'll walk through using buttons from the EngagePHD store if you don't have design experience to create your own buttons in design tools such as Photoshop. Buttons can either be used in a template or added to individual pages. The advantage of using buttons in templates is that the template can be added to multiple pages and the buttons will remain consistent as far as their location within the layout. When using templates, it's important to remember that each time you need to make changes to buttons or other elements within the template, you can't make those changes from pages. You will need to go back to the designer for the template to make those changes from there. It's important to note that you do not have to use a template design for your pages. However, for the application to work, your pages do require that a template is used. If you don't want to design a template, simply create a blank template, and in this example, we'll call this template blank and just simply leave it blank. Let's walk through an example of creating a template. I've used the Create New button to create a new template and called it our main template. By default, our page resolution will be 1920 by 1080, and if we're using portrait screens, we would need to flip around our design to be 1080 by 1920. I'll save these settings and go to the designer to start adding content. From here, we would have a blank canvas to work with. We will use the icons on our toolbar to add content we need for our design. Remember, all the content we add to our template designer will show on each page that uses this template. So it's important to think about how you would like to design the template before starting to create your content. Maybe we'll just add a background, which we would add by using the Add Image icon. This will open up the Assets library where we can upload our background and add it to the template. Maybe we also want to add a few buttons that we've created in PowerPoint or Photoshop, or from the store, which we'll be reviewing in an upcoming video in this series. Again, we'll use the Add Image button to upload our files and add them to our designer. We can also use the Add Text icon to add a zone for editable text. It really depends on what you need in the template. You won't be able to link any images or buttons to pages until pages are created. After we've created our template, we can now start creating our pages. Think of pages like pages on a website. The buttons you add to templates or other pages can be linked to other pages to create the user experience. It's important to map out exactly the way you want your pages to be linked before creating your application. Let's start by clicking on the Create New button under Pages. Let's briefly talk about the various settings under the page properties. The name will be the name of the page. The resolution of the page should remain consistent for all templates and pages to fit the height and width of the screen. By default, this will always be 1920 by 1080. The template settings is where you would attach the template you would like to use for this page. We can use the main template we created or create a blank template and use that one instead. A template must be added to each page for the application to work properly. The timeout mode allows you to define when you want the page to time out when the touchscreen is not being used. You can use the application default, which will be a global setting for all pages to follow if set to this setting. We'll talk about the application default when we get to the overall application settings. Page specified will follow the timeout settings you define below this setting, or no timeout, which will do nothing. The timeout page allows you to select a specific page that the touchscreen will go to when timeout is active. In this example, we're just giving our page a name, assigning a template, and now we'll save and go to the designer. If we assigned a template that has a background, buttons, or other pieces of content, we'll see this in our page designer. But we cannot make changes to those elements unless we go back to the template. If we created a blank template, the page designer will also be blank, and we will use the icons on our toolbar to add content. Hopefully this shows you the difference between the benefits of using templates with content versus a blank template. Once you have your pages created, you can go back to the template and link your pages to the image buttons you added to your template or other individual pages. Let's go back to our main template. Let's link our image to the page that we just created. We'll do this by right-clicking on the image and selecting Link to Page. This will open a window with a drop-down where we can select the page that we want to link our button to. And then we click Save. If you don't have access to design tools like Photoshop or PowerPoint to design your buttons, you can create links on text zones within your templates or pages. If you want to create buttons within your pages or templates without creating an image as your button, text zones can be used as buttons within your templates or pages. The following steps will walk through adding links to text zones. From the main page of your application, open the designer from the template or page you would like to add your text link to. Click on the Add Text button and add the text needed and apply a font style. From the zone settings, click on the Page Link drop-down and select the page you would like to link your text to. Click Apply to save these changes. Then resize the height and width of the zone as needed to create the linked area when touched. When you preview your application or update the application on your touchscreen, the text can now be used as a button. Once your templates and pages have been created, you will need to create your application, which will provide the default actions and show mapping of how your pages are linked. Under Applications, click on the Create New button, give your application a name, and in this example, I'm going to call our application our Information Touchscreen. The timeout will be the default timeout seconds. Remember, each page has the option to follow this default timeout action or use a page-specific timeout action. The page dropdown will allow you to select the page that the application will default to after the timeout. For example, maybe you will have a home page or a landing page. Once you save your application, you can then click on the Properties icon, and if you have buttons that are linked to pages, you will see a mapped tree of how those pages are linked. From here, you can also preview each page or start from the beginning to ensure that all your buttons are linked correctly. This preview will open in the same tab, so you will need to use your back arrow in your browser to take you back to the application settings page. Here's a tip. You can open the preview in a new tab in your browser by right-clicking on the preview button and selecting Open in New Tab. Now that we've created our application, in the next video we'll walk through assigning the application to touchscreen-enabled players. From the navigation, click on Players. Click on the player you would like to add the application to. Click on the Application drop-down and select the application. Now click on the Save button at the bottom of the player record page. If the player is online and connected to the software, it will start downloading the application within a minute or two, and you will be able to navigate the application on your live touchscreen. It's important to note that while application templates and pages automatically save your changes when you're working in the designer, applications will not automatically download your changes to the player. Each time you want to download any changes you've made, you will need to send a force update to the player. From the Players page, click on the Player Action button and select Force Update. There's a Player Action button from either the main Players page or from the player record when you click on the player. This action will tell the player to download all the changes you've made and update the touchscreen.